All right, so thanks everybody for coming out. I think I have a big announcement. I got to throw it to all the groups, right?
I know.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Miller. I'm the VP of Engineering here at CloudSpace. I think most everybody knows what we do, web and mobile development. And we try to be very active in the community. We obviously hold the meetups and whatnot. But we always like to take a broader approach, right? So I've asked Caitlin.
Asked is saying it nicely.
I volunteered Caitlin to do a JavaScript talk. So she's actually going to learn some JavaScript and go through. It's not going to be anything ultra advanced. Her position here with the company is not in a development role. But as I see a couple of the girls sitting out here, what I want you guys to do is encourage everybody, because that's going to be like the girls' night here, because there's a couple of girls that are talking as well.
Yes.
So we'd like to encourage the broader community to come out. We'd like all of you to come out. But particularly, this is a good opportunity to get kind of the fringe pieces of our community to get up here and give some talks, right? So I'm going to encourage everybody, if there's something you want to hear, if there's a subject you want to learn, get up here and talk about it. The larger the community grows, the larger the community is, the deeper the subject matter, and obviously the more everybody takes out of this. So from that side, I want to say thanks for everybody for coming out, being a part of the community. We always like suggestions, but she'll post on when this is going to be out there, but make sure you spread the word. So other than that, thank you for coming out. We really do appreciate it, and I'm going to hand it to you.
Yay. Okay, so yeah, that's happening. It's going to be April 14th. If you are a member of my JavaScript group, you will get an email tomorrow about, hey, I'm going to let you guys give me suggestions for topics, because I'm only going to learn what I got to build. I have a month and a half to do this, guys, while running my actual job. So yeah, you got to bear with me. But on that note, it is going to be an all-women's speaking meetup as best as I can. I've got one confirmed speaker. I am looking for a second JavaScript, preferably female. Yeah, by the way, if I'm learning this in a month and a half without going through IronYard, I think you might be able to do it. By the way, I might talk to David about that.
And remember, everything that you guys do in Ruby, right, usually has a JavaScript component.
It does.
A Angular component to it, right? So
It does.
It's a good marriage of technologies. So it's part of the reason why I want to see kind of the broader group come out and be a part of it, because they are integrated worlds.
Yes.
And we do projects all the time where, we have our Ruby backend folks, and we have all of our JavaScript and Angular frontend folks, and we need more cross-pollination between that, right?
We're doing that right now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The RS is just starting a 2-week.
It's a great place to increase skills, and I think it's a good opportunity for the community as a whole. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, we like to make you learn all sorts of different stuff. We got a couple of our guys who are cross-pollinated, but not in the typical Angular Ruby structure. More so, hey, this guy knows Ruby and he knows iOS. But speaking of Joey, but so yeah, that's going on. That's in a month and a half. So you guys will, if you're not already a member. Oh, by the way, partially thanks to you, our JavaScript meetup does have 300 members. How the hell we pull that off, I don't know. Let's make Ruby bigger, though. Ruby is the one we started with. JavaScript was the second one that we launched, so let's try to make Ruby bigger, guys. Let's do that. I love speakers for Ruby.
I think the 300 person should get like a car or something.
You better talk to Todd about that.
I'm the one that's on the 300.
This is the 300th person, so
All I got was yelling.
Yeah, you did. Because I was like, damn it, I actually wanted a real person to be the 300 person. Okay. I could do that. We deal with each other all day, every day. I could say that. But, so, on another random note, if you guys didn't catch the email today, there is a 5th meetup in March. It's CSS/front end. No, do not come ask me to be a speaker for it. I already have 3 speakers and have 3 more in case any of them bail. But join the group, come attend that one. If that one gets big, who knows what'll happen. We may play around with it. But I'm just going to go ahead and get this going so that way we can end up going over to World Beer. So, Brian, would you like to talk about what teaching at Iron Yard has taught you?
Oh, I gotta have this thing
Yes,
hooked
you
up
do.
too.
That way YouTube can listen to you.
I could have done this earlier.
No, because I needed that.
Oh.
Don't worry, just put it on your shirt. Really easy.
You'd think so. There we go. All right. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Okay, my name's Brian, and I'm the Ruby instructor at the Iron Yard downtown. My original idea for this talk was I was going to talk about what teaching Ruby and Rails had taught me about Ruby and Rails. But I decided that rather than get into discussions about what is an object and how is the end keyword used in different contexts, I'd talk a little bit more broadly about what I've learned about learning Ruby and Rails and actually learning in general. To start out, if you ever plan on explaining things to more than, say, 2 people at a time, you should really watch this video, Confessions of a Converted Lecturer. This guy, Eric Mazer, is a physics professor at Harvard who, despite that, is actually interested in teaching other human beings things. And as a scientist, he was also interested in doing a little bit of experimentation. And what he did was, running a handful of experiments in his class, he figured out that lecturing, which is what I'm doing right now, is not a terribly effective way of communicating information to people, at least not in a way that sticks. This video has been very influential in my teaching and in the company in general. This is the genesis of some of the things I've been doing to my students, stuff like starting out every class with a quiz question that they're not expected to be able to answer fully as a way of getting people engaged and getting them ready to start thinking about the coding topics of the day. And he's also really big on having people interact with each other instead of just sit quietly and listen to somebody, a voice from the front of the room. And so I want you guys to do that. I'll spare you the quiz, but take a second, introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you, assuming you have a person sitting next to you.
I like this. We're breaking up the clicks.
Right?
Clicks.
They're moving on.
Wow.
And now that you've met each other, I want you to just mutter to each other about the presentation while it's going on. And if you didn't have to introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you because you already knew the person sitting next to you, then I'd encourage you to sit somewhere different the next time you go to one of these things. This is a meetup.
Yeah, stop sitting next to each other, guys. Seriously.
It's a meetup,
It's
and
not cool.
if you don't meet anybody, it's just an up. Which, what good is that?
I like it.
I found out about that video from this book, Make It Stick, which is where I'm going to get about half of my presentation for tonight. This book is phenomenal. It's an overview of cognitive science and current research on how learning happens, but it's not presented as an overview of cognitive science and how learning happens. It's a really accessible, quick read with a lot of storytelling that describes the process of how learning happens. There's too much in this book to really to cover here, so I'll just go through a couple points. One of them is that learning works better if you have spaced repetition. In other words, you really don't get that far if you just pound yourself into a topic for a day or a week and then go on to something else and just pretend like everything is in your brain and it's set. this is fortunate for the kind of program we have at the Iron Yard because we get to do this. We keep coming back to things over and over and over again. We talk about arrays and hashes in week 1 and week 2 and week 3, and then they come back as active relations stuff, which kind of works like arrays, objects which kind of work like hashes. And so you get to have really stuff more like the pattern on the right, which works a lot better. You want to keep seeing things. And I should say this book affects not only how I teach Ruby, but how I'm teaching myself stuff. I've given the idea of just saying, all right, this weekend I'm going to learn Angular, and I'm going to spend 12 hours this Saturday, and it's all going to be in my head, and then I'm going to be done. So you're not going to be able to do that with JavaScript either. You're going to have to go day by day by day. Sorry.
Guess what I'm starting tomorrow.
Good for you.
We'll see about that.
Now, related to that is the idea that you want to have interleaved practice of several different related things. Again, instead of just pounding on one and then pounding on a second one, pounding on a third, you go back and forth. For one thing, that forces you to have spaced repetition because as you go from the first to the second, that means you're not still pounding on the first. For another, it really helps you sharpen up the delineations of each topic. You find out as you look at Ruby and then JavaScript, what do programming languages have in common, but also what's distinctive about Ruby, what makes it different from JavaScript. And this is something that we do at the Iron Yard also. As we keep going back and forth between topics, you start to see kind of the outlines and the contours of each one individually. And the third point that I got out of the book is the importance of reflection and just taking some time to either think about is not great on its own, but preferably talk about or write down what you've just learned. This, for me, this is the best reason for blogging, even though I haven't started to do it yet. This is also the reason why I've had my class on probably more days than not, as part of their homework, write down what they did that day. You know, what did they figure out? Where did they get hung up? What did they think of the last night's assignment? Because taking that time to really get your thoughts from an almost conscious level up into the conscious mind really helps you understand things a lot better. And this is also why I'm grateful to Caitlin for giving me the opportunity to come up and talk, because in the process of putting a presentation together, it forced me to think about some things. And so I think I understand some stuff better for having gone through this. I really should make you guys get the little hat like this and just announce I learned something today. I think that'll be...
We should get Iron Yard hats like that and then give them out.
We really should.
I'll talk to David.
Would you? So yeah, Susanna would make that happen.
David would like that.
Yeah, David. David wouldn't like the hat competition is the problem. David Rogers, he's known for his hats.
He is known for his hats. This one's kind of more of a, hey, I learned something.
All right, so continuing with the reflections, and by the way, I picked this not only because it's reflective, but because where is that guy? In a cloud space, yeah. So it's all right there.
I like the cheesy reference.
So I thought a lot for this talk about why it is that new computer programming students struggle, and especially why do the people who really struggle, who struggle at what feels like very elementary things, what makes that difficulty different from the people who are struggling with more advanced stuff? Everybody in the class struggles, don't get me wrong. Everybody's just beating themselves to death day in and day out. But some people are struggling with more complicated things than others. And let's see what this, yeah, don't be that guy. See, that's just, yeah, that's evergreen.
You use that one a lot.
It's careless typing, you can tell. At no point is he even looking where his fingers are going when he has fingers. And then he's not looking eventually where his stumps are going. See, eyes are closed, and then now he's not looking where his skull is making kind of... Careless typing is the #1 problem. In fact, just on the train ride home, I was talking to Ben Golke, who's our new iOS instructor, who's in his second day. And I told him that the topic of my talk for tonight was going to be where new people have trouble. And he said, oh my gosh, half of my class today couldn't get the homework done because they mistyped something. The nice thing about careless typing is it's something that you can fix fairly easily if you pay attention. It also makes it a little bit easier to spot typos if you're careful about how you format your code. There's a typo in here that's not nearly as obvious, I don't think, as when I write it like that. Nicely formatted stuff. Where's the problem here?
You're missing an end and apply.
Yeah, I'm missing an end right after the else right there, which if you have everything indented nicely and you know to look for that kind of thing, that fairly leaps out at you, right? If you've been doing this for a while, it's almost painful to see that the end is. But as painful as this is more like having the eyes come out of the sockets, right? If you've been.
Yeah, I would literally just retab it before even trying to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, you would, because it would make it easier to read, and it would make the pain go away, which are both desirable things. And sure enough, the people both in the fall cohort when I was working with the JavaScript class, and also the people who are struggling more in the Ruby cohort this time, are typing stuff more often like this than like this. And that's a pretty simple change to make. That's not something I've emphasized enough. I haven't explicitly told people. I've just been getting in front of the class and typing more in this format and hoping that it would just kind of catch on. And for a lot of people it has. But I think in future classes I'm really going to make a point of typing nicely.
Now they should know because there's a few of them.
Yeah, these guys are not the ones who are typing like that.
I like how you finesse.
Oh, I know what I'm doing. Right.
Natural selection, there you go.
Something that I mentioned briefly in my class I didn't make a big deal of, and I think I'm going to make a bigger deal for next time, is this Ruby style guide. How many are familiar with this project, have looked at it or read through it? I've read over these rules. I haven't memorized everything. Most of it is kind of familiar to me just because I've spent several years reading Ruby code, and eventually you kind of get an idea for how things are supposed to look. If you haven't spent all that time, if you'd like to take a shortcut around all that reading and learning the formats, now there's a nice set of rules. It's a fairly lengthy set of rules, but you'll be able to read through this a lot more quickly than you'll be able to read enough code to internalize all these rules. So if you're new to this, I would recommend the Ruby style guide. Let's see, hopping back into now for some stuff, typos are typos, like misspelled words, lines that are missing. Some stuff you need to know a little bit of Ruby, which is kind of unfortunate because Ruby is a lot more forgiving about what counts as a typo and what doesn't. So things like this, 8 lines of hashes, how many of those are valid? Talk to the people around you. I'll just be here wiping sweat off my face. Talk to the people around. I'm not hearing muttering. I asked for muttering. Let's see, how many people say there's, all these are valid? How many say all of them are okay? We got one, all of them are okay. How many say one mistake? One mistake, a lot of one mistakes. How many 2 mistakes? 3? 4? They're not all right. 4, 5, and 7 all kind of concerned me for the space after the value in each one, but it turns out Ruby doesn't mind that. I think some things would. The easiest way to see which one is wrong is to save this as a Ruby file, and then to get this more visible out there, if I change this color scheme, and now it should jump out at you that 6 is the only problem child in the list, that you can't have the space between the value and the key and the colon. That's not a symbol anymore, that becomes a local variable, and that doesn't fly. This is harder than just finding a misspelled word if all you have to go by is reading the word. On the other hand, as you can see here, if you just take the cues that the code editor is giving you, this is a lot easier than seeing a misspelled word. So bear in mind that all the tools that you use were built by people who want to solve these kinds of problems. And that goes not just for code editors. You should take a hint and let the tools help you, but the tool that I've really tried to drill into people the most to not be afraid of, yes, it's our old friend, the error message. Error messages, I think, just strike fear into the hearts of new developers, even people who've been doing it for a while, because it feels kind of like an attack. It feels like if you're trying to run my code, just internally it feels like this. It feels that this is what it's telling you, that it's disgusted that you even attempted to defile the beauty of its own code existence. And so you just feel wretched. I used to feel wretched looking at error messages before I started teaching, and then I realized people were just sacrificing countless hours and feeling bad about themselves when they really should be feeling bad about me. Just getting caught up in unnecessary emotion. The error message, same as the code editor, was built in order to help you understand your code better. In fact, at this point, the way I conceptualize, who here has not seen the movie Galaxy Quest? Anybody not seen? Wow, look, I'm shocked. On movie night on Wednesday. Okay, Galaxy Quest is basically Star Trek, although they can't call it Star Trek, and the cast of it, it's many years later, and that was kind of the big role in their lives, and now they kind of go to the conventions and they put up with all that stuff. Only there's a race of actual space aliens who don't understand what drama is, and they pull everybody up into the ship thinking that these are honest to goodness, spacefaring superheroes. Hilarity ensues, as I will demonstrate here. Staff Sergeant Chen, to me, I hear his voice, and see if you can hear the voice. Tony Shalhoub, who will show up in about 5-10 seconds.
Hi guys, listen, they're telling me the generators won't take it. The ship is breaking apart and all that. Just FYI. We gotta stop!
To me, Staff Sergeant Chen, that's the voice that I hear anytime I run across an error message now. He's not angry at you. He's just let you know, there's a little problem. So I always hear it like, hey, FYI error. It's no big deal, but there's something in your code. I think it says undefined method. Probably what you could do, it's probably a typo, so you could just go in, fix a misspelling, or maybe you could Google around, see how other people have dealt with this thing. I'm sure it'll be okay. And really, if you're going to attach an emotion to a text message on a screen anyway, you might as well make it something friendly and nonchalant like this, right? So let the error message be your friend. Anytime in class I have an error message come up, and I've trained everybody to do this now who's been in the class, I just say, oh look, It's our old friend, the error message. He's come to tell us about an error. And you really buy into it after a while, and now it's painless now, right? When you see an error message, it's not, oh, badge of shame, I've seen an error message. And the error message, that whole bit of logic was put into IRB by very skilled Ruby developers because they anticipated they were also going to see error messages. All right, where are we after taking the hint? RTFD is a little acronym. David Rogers, who teaches the front-end class, we like to joke with each other that our students pay us an awful lot of money so that we can read to them documentation off of the internet, which we ask them to read for themselves, and which, by the way, is freely available. So RTFD, which of course stands for Read the Free Documentation. Well, I mean, documentation is not the only word, but it's amazing. I think everybody who's been in this situation was asked me or David the question and then been told, hey, what does the documentation say? And then they go read, they're just amazed at how many answers are revealed by the documentation, which again was put there by expert developers to solve exactly these kind of problems. There are a lot of people who want you to solve your problems. Just, help us help you. That's the message. Another thing that better developers do that not as good developers don't is talking over their problems. I don't mean necessarily laying on the couch, although maybe laying on the couch. You can talk it over to the person sitting next to you. That's often a valuable resource. You can write into Stack Overflow. You can even do what Ernie is doing. How many have heard the term rubber ducking? Most of you. I'm going actually back to Galaxy Quest because this has the best example of rubber ducking ever committed to cinema. This is absolutely fantastic.
Tech Sergeant Chen, I'm sorry to ask this of you so shortly after your arrival, but members of the reactor staff have a question they find most pressing.
Sir, we have had unexplained proton surges in our Delta unit. They cannot be verified on the subfrequency spectrum.
That's an Iron Yard student.
Detector when scanning the beryllium sphere, and we're hoping you would be able to advise us.
This is me or David.
I see. That is a puzzler.
It is. Yes, that's Dwight from The Office.
What do you think?
That possibly the valence bonds have shifted bilaterally?
What does that mean?
Yes, I see. Yes, it means that the bonding molecules have become covalent.
So,
That's my job right there.
The solution is to introduce a bonding substrate, a two-molecule compound sharing a free electron, and bombard their ion with the reflective isotopes.
he's got it.
It's so obvious.
Sergeant Chen, you're
It's funny because it's true. It's funny because people do that to me all the time. In the JavaScript class, they got into Angular, which I had not really looked at that point in my life. And people would come up to me with Angular questions. And I would be Staff Sergeant Chen. I would say, so, Nick, what does that mean? What are the implications there? And Nick would do what Dwight did and figure everything out and go on his way. Rubber ducking, for those who have not heard the term before, it comes from the software practice of keeping a little rubber duck inside your cubicle, and when you get stuck on something, you talk to the duck. because the same as reflecting on a problem, same as blogging about it or making a presentation about it, just forcing your thoughts from that almost conscious level all the way up to the point where you can form coherent sentences will help you to understand things better. And you can actually talk yourself into a solution to a problem. It's fantastic. It's right. Well, one of the reasons. Company sometimes. Another difference between better developers and people who are struggling, especially early on, is that better developers are just not as ambitious. New people, we had a guy in the fall class who had just world-changing plans. I mean, he had big ideas, and they turned out not to work because they were too much work. He's my TA now. And the funniest thing that I've seen all class is that he sits in the back, and he's a bright guy, so he's sitting in the back and he's working on an Angular project for which he has to pick up .NET on his own to understand, and then he's also freelancing, and then he's doing some Raspberry Pi stuff on the side while making sure that he's learning enough Ruby to keep ahead of the Ruby class. So it's not like he's slow, but he's learned to kind of curtail his ambition, and he's seated in the back of the class next to one of the more ambitious students who starts going off one day about a final project idea she has that's going to take all the details from Realtor.com, but then add in a social aspect and maybe kind of a first-person shooter kind of a thing. and my TA is just kind of sitting there typing away, and suddenly he hears a couple words, and he just looks up, turns over, and goes right back to what he was doing, because he was where she is now, and soon she will learn. Maybe she's learned right now because she's sitting in the room. This point kind of bothered me a little bit, the idea that you had to be less ambitious. And this is my favorite point that I thought about, because it ends up relating, I think, to why teaching is hard. There are a lot of words up there. This is a big quote from my favorite book from earlier. And the essence of this is that the more you know something, the harder it is to explain, because you forget everything that goes into it. I used to teach high school in California. And if you take away nothing else from this talk, do not teach high school in California, for the love of God. But while I was there, I had a much easier time teaching calculus class than I did the pre-algebra class, because I remember what it was like to learn calculus, and I know what kind of mistakes you make in a calculus class. I can't imagine what it's like to not know fractions anymore. That's just alien to me. I forgot all of the steps that are involved in dealing with fractions. So the better that you understand something, the harder it is to teach. Which is especially a problem when you're dealing with something like Rails or Angular, because these are technologies that were developed by people who had mastered something, and they were put together for the express purpose of hiding away intermediate steps. So not only do you have the inherent problem in teaching of not being able to remember the intermediate steps, but we're trying to teach things that were developed to obscure the intermediate steps, to abstract those things away. I really thought that teaching Rails was going to be easier than teaching Ruby because using Rails is easier than using Ruby. But the reason it's easier is because I don't have to think about a bunch of details that I have to remember in order to teach somebody else about them, so that they know what the defaults are, so that then they can learn to ignore them. But the real killer is why learning programming is harder than teaching anything, which is that relative to the computer, you have achieved mastery. In any other domain of knowledge other than the specific things that computers are good at, you have a more sophisticated understanding than the computer does. Some of the early assignments that we give in the class are stuff like making a blackjack game or tic-tac-toe. And the reason that computer science classes always do this is because we think, well, those are accessible problems. People understand those. So we're kind of meeting them halfway, right? You know at least the thing that you're trying to put into software. You just don't quite know the software yet. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's not a bad idea. Because you're coming to the computer with a very sophisticated understanding of what it means to play tic-tac-toe. You've forgotten all of the intermediate steps about what it means to have a board, whether or not you can put two things in the same space. There are a lot of details that you've forgotten about. In fact, I kind of feel like a professional software developer is just somebody who has managed to make themselves smart about the things that computers are smart at while becoming heartbreakingly stupid about everything else in the world. Which is why peer-to-peer instruction, which works at any level of education, never makes sense from the outside. I used to see like a C student in pre-algebra talking to a D student in pre-algebra, and the C student would say something that to me was just complete nonsense, but would move the D student further along towards the correct answer. They could talk to each other. They could understand each other in a way that I couldn't understand either of them. In the same way, people who are new to software development look at somebody who's really experienced at software development talking to a computer. It's the same kind of problem. You guys are too far above us to understand the computer and I are down here, talking in just pigeon little fragments of language that in your more sophisticated understanding of things just doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that's the most important thing in getting to be a good developer, is just training yourselves to be stupid at the right times. That's it. That's right. That's it for me.
Any questions, guys?
Oh, I've dropped my phone.
Well, see, this is my meetup, so he kind of has to. But it can't be
I
recorded.
appreciate the sentiment, though.
Yeah.
You've learned well. No Etsy-related questions. No.
So you guys want to laugh at something? Before he decided to be able to actually teach this Ruby class, he talked at my first ever Ruby meetup here with David, and it was his, well, he didn't know it at the time, but it was kind of his let's see what the hell he knows what he's talking about before I have him actually teach Ruby.
Oh, that was part of the interview process?
Yeah, you should know about it. So yeah, that's kind of a funny little haha, because you know, now you're in here giving another talk about what you've learned while teaching Ruby.
And I'm sure I'll be back again in the summer when I'll have a much better excuse to be this way.
Yes, that you will. All right, where'd Kevin go? All right, so I guess while he's in the bathroom, remember those, bathroom break. There's pizza. Please eat it. Go get seconds if you want it. Exactly. Come on, go get seconds. I was a fat kid. I got seconds. I will kick Kevin's ass. So, on a side note, those little tickets I gave you, those are for a book and a t-shirt. If you want to do the whole hashtag University Ruby thing on Twitter, I forgot to mention it at the beginning, you're more than welcome to. Who knows, maybe I'll give you a bag or two. Please don't make it really bad. My Ruby events have a habit of making things really bad. Very few know about this, but it was bad. So on that note, you can do hashtag University Ruby. Why not? I might give you a bag if I think it's really entertaining. Preferably pertaining to Ruby, but you know. But otherwise, keep a hold of those tickets, because as soon as this one over here is done talking, which by the way, hook up your computer.
All right.
I'm going to be giving those away, so we can go get a round of beer, a roll of beer. And I think all of you guys in here are 21. If you're not 21, hang out and get a soda or water. Please. Networking is actually very beneficial, and I tell everybody that. If you don't drink, get water, get soda, get something. Are you HDMI? Yes, you are. Pretty. at you. Yes and no. You're split screen. Nope. Oh. What's it doing? All right.
No, it's fine.
There you go. Oh,
Okay.
You're playing with your phone. All right. This is Kevin, guys. He's never spoken at one of my meetups, so kudos to you. Enjoy.
Hey, so I'm Kevin. I've never spoken at one of these before. I'm going to talk about making a Vagrant box for Rails. You guys might not know what that means, so first and foremost, why should you care? Making a Vagrant box for Rails is you're making a separate server on your computer that handles all your Rails stuff. So you don't have to install anything on your actual computer. You have it in its own little environment that you can destroy or rebuild on the fly. Also, you can take it, export it, give it to somebody else working on your project, and then they can just up it and you guys have the exact same box. So there's a lot of times when you're making something and you have certain dependencies, they have different dependencies, like sometimes your computer will be in UTF-8, theirs won't, conflicts will happen, you'll get an error, they won't, and you guys spend 20 minutes arguing before you figure out it's something wrong with one of your computers. So this takes care of that. The way it takes care of that is, well, first you need Git, and it uses VirtualBox. You can also use other things like VMware, and with Vagrant, you can port that to Amazon, or you can port that to stuff like Heroku. Also, Vagrant uses Chef, but we'll install that as we go. VirtualBox is, like I said, it's a separate server for your computer. You can also load things like Windows in it, or Mac or Ubuntu, but we're going to stick with the server for now. Vagrant is just pretty much at the base level, Vagrant is a configuration file for your VirtualBox or your virtual machine. It's just telling your virtual machine what to set up. And Chef is just a list of, they're called cookbooks, and cookbooks wrap recipes together. And it's really just a list of things for your server to do to set stuff up. Getting started, you're going to want to, after you install Vagrant, you're going to want to install 2 plugins. These 2 plugins are Vagrant VBGuest. This just helps your VirtualBox talk to your host computer and makes things easier to share resources and things like that. Also, you're going to want to get Librarian Chef. The only reason you want to get that is it makes it a lot easier to install dependencies that are needed. So it's like a gem file for Chef. Rather than having to go on Git and downloading the stuff and setting it up in your folder, you just make a file and it does it for you. So after that, you're going to want to make a project name and make a Vagrant directory in that project. CD into the Vagrant directory and type Vagrant init. This will create a Vagrant file which has all the configuration you need to set up your server. And then finally, create a file called Chef file. This Chef file is like a gem file. It's where you put all your dependencies when you're doing Chef. So real quick, the folders are pretty self-explanatory. Vagrant init created a Vagrant file, and the Chef file is part of the Librarian Chef plugin. It lets you define dependencies. The Chef file contents, first you need to define where exactly the Chef files are going to be coming from. So it's like source in a gem file, so you just do site. And then what cookbooks you need. We're going to have the apt cookbook, Build Essential, because you need those for just setting up any server. We're going to get MySQL, Ruby builds, Node.js. RBEnv is like Ruby version. It's pretty much the same thing. And then Vim, just in case you need to edit anything on the server itself. The entire Chef file looks like that. You just save it, exit. And then for the Vagrant file, when you open up the Vagrant file in something like Sublime or Atom or whatever you want to use, it is filled with a bunch of commented out, very well structured things to help you. Uncomment this if you want to do this, uncomment this if you want to do this, this block does this. But for our example, we're going to erase it all because we're just going to do it right from scratch because I'm going to walk you through what each thing does. So for the skeleton structure, blank file, this is the basic of what you need. So everything that we're going to do is going to go between that do and that end. And the Vagrant API version is just what version of Vagrant you're going to use. Vagrant 1 is very different than Vagrant 2, so we're going to stick with 2. We're going to define a base box. Is going to be Ubuntu Trusty 64. The base box is really just the bare bones stuff you need to get your server up and able to talk to it. So there are a lot of people that have created very basic base boxes for you to use. So there's a Trusty 64, there's a Trusty 32. There's actually a lot of different base boxes that you can download from this site right here that you can just search for all of the requirements that you need for a server and download it. So to give ourselves a little more wiggle room, we're going to give ourselves 2 gigs of RAM. And the way to do that is just between that do and that end, customize your virtual box to give yourself memory of 2048. After that, since we're using this as sort of to work on Rails projects, we want to port forward 3000 port on our server to the 3000 port on your host machine. The way you do that is you just write this line down. Really, all of this is just writing configuration lines down in a Ruby file. And then we want to mount our files from our computer to our server. And this line right here will mount in your Vagrant folder. It will go one, mount that on your server as /mnt. So when you SSH into your server, you just go cd/mnt and you're in your file that you would be in on your computer. And they sync up. It's dynamic. When you change something on the file on your computer, it'll change it on the server. And now you want to have your chef configs wrapped together because you already have everything defined in your chef file. Now you need to actually call it in your Vagrant file. First, you need a wrapper. So this is our wrapper. All of our chef stuff we're going to do between the do and the end because we're configuring the VM permission chef solo. And if you want to add an individual recipe, you use ;. If not, it will just add the default recipe. So if you go into any of the chef folders, into any of the recipe folders within those cookbooks, you'll see different recipes. If you don't specify which recipe you want to use, it will use the default. So these are all the recipes we're going to use. We're defining our chef cookbooks path. So any recipes that get made are going to be put into the cookbooks folder. We're going to add apt, node, Ruby, ruby-env user, and ruby-env vagrant. Ruby-env vagrant is specifically for Vagrant, and it helps ruby-env talk to Vagrant and manage dependencies. Vim, MySQL Server, and MySQL Client. Ta-da. So what we want to tell Chef is, basically what we want to tell RB-env is that we want to install Ruby version 2.1.2. We want to install the bundler gem and the Rails gem for this version of Ruby. If you already have a Rails project that you're doing this for, you don't need to install the Rails gem because in your gem file, it will auto-install everything that you need. You definitely need the bundler though. And then we want to set our MySQL root password to blank. You can also do Postgres or any other kind of database you want to. I just use MySQL. The full version of that looks like this. It goes under the chef add recipe. So you do chef.json and you just give it different dependencies for it to use. So we're going to have a username Vagrant. There's our Ruby version. Our gems are bundler and Rails. And set your root password to nothing. And that's everything. Oh, did you not? Oh, no. So that's everything that has to do with the setup. You're pretty much done with setting up your server. So the whole Vagrant file looks like this. And it's just a Ruby configuration file. It's not anything special. And after you have everything defined, you actually want to build the box and start it. So starting the box, you just type in Vagrant up in your Vagrant folder. it's going to take forever because it needs to download every one of those dependencies. So go make a sandwich, go take a shower, do whatever you want to do, but it is going to take a long time.
Do you know if it takes less time the second time you do that?
Yes, it takes.
Does it cache the...
It actually downloads all of the Chef files onto your computer. So it will take less time the second time you do that, but there's something else you can do that I'll talk about in a minute. So once it vagrants up, it runs through all the code. You'll see a bunch of green, and then it'll just be back to the command prompt. To get into your server, in case it asks you for the password is always going to be Vagrant. You can change that yourself in the Vagrant configuration, but if you're just using it on your own private machine and you're not opening it up to the public, you might as well just keep it Vagrant. You type in Vagrant SSH, goes into your box, and then you can start installing your gems. You can start installing. What you would do is, for example, if you already had a gem file and that gem file was at /project name /gem file, you would go into cd/mnt bundle install. And then you have to do RBM rehash for it to register all of those gems to your path. From there, you can do Rails, you can do Rake, you can do whatever you want. And you can do Rails server. The only thing with Rails server that you need to do differently is you need to point it to 0.0.0.0. The reason you do that is because it makes Rails listen to all interfaces, not just 127.0.0.1. But it's porting port 3000 to your local host, which is 127.0.0.1. So you just do that, and then you can access everything on localhost 3000 like you would normally. This is what you were talking about. So I made a repo with all this information in it. There's a branch called original, and this has all of the Vagrant file like we did before. But what I went ahead and did is there's another branch on the master branch. This actually, the config VM box URL, I already created this box, so I did Vagrant up, let it run for like 15, 20 minutes. And then I did another command you can do called Vagrant package. And you do Vagrant package, and just do, so you would do Vagrant package -- output and give it a name. And then when you hit enter, it will it'll shut down your box, take all of the configurations you've already done to it, and create a new base box out of it. So you would just add that where you add what box you're using, what base box. You would just call it whatever you want, give it the URL of wherever you put that box, and then when anybody does it, once the initial download is done, it comes up in about 3 seconds. It just needs to turn the box on, and then it's done.
Something to add to that, if you in another Vagrant file in another project use the same name, like the same box name, it won't download it again. It'll just use the cache.
Yep.
So that causes hilariously bad consequences if you're expecting it to go get it and do something different. You just sort of keep that in mind, because that will cause you to lose some sleep.
Yeah. If that ever happens, you can do Vagrant box remove and remove the actual box name, and it will unlink it and remove it from the cache.
Or just always name it something that has the project name in it.
Yeah. Or name it something crazy.
There you go.
Yeah. You're never going to mash the keyboard the same twice, which is not true. I've done that so many times. So back here. And like I said, the master branch is a boxed up version of the server. Last but not least, you're going to want to stop your Vagrant box. There are 2 ways to do that. You can do Vagrant halt. That just shuts down your Vagrant box, but it still takes up that amount of space and still takes up that amount of whatever you gave it. You're just shutting it down. But if you want to completely destroy everything and get rid of the box itself, you can do Vagrant destroy. And Vagrant destroy will be like, are you sure you want to get rid of this? You get rid of it. But then when you do Vagrant up again, it's going to take forever. unless you've downloaded the box. Then it'll take like 10 seconds. Anybody have any questions? I know I kind of ran through that kind of fast.
So with the Vagrant box, you can import that into an EC2.
Yep.
With these, just pretty much drop it into the server and it'll
Mm-hmm.
open up.
Yep. Actually, there's another thing that I did not mention here, but it's really cool. There's this thing called PuPHPET, and this used, oh my God, this is awful on this resolution. It used to be just for PHP. That's why it's called Puffit. But now it's for so much more than just that. So you can actually choose to have it be an Amazon whatnot. And then, oh God, where are you? I don't want to have to go through each one of these things. Yeah.
Major responsive failure.
So you can do Apache or Nginx. And then it also gives you Ruby, Node, Python, add whatever gems or anything. Just go through this step-by-step GUI, and it will actually give you a Vagrant file and a zip file of just whatever you set up. So you can just straight up do Vagrant up. Yeah, using this kind of stuff, there is no reason that you and someone else in your production environment should have any problems talking to each other. But anybody have any other questions?
So do you end up developing on the box that Vagrant deploys?
Yeah.
Like, do all your development on it?
Oh, no. So when you mount the folder, it mounts it from your local machine. So as you develop on your local machine, it matches it to the server.
Okay, and I mean, like, so the files match, and you can build your stuff, and it'll deploy the folder, but like, so you go to start the server on the server, and then still, right?
Start the server on the server.
Open a terminal in the Vagrant box that this got built?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you open the terminal and you Vagrant SSH into the Vagrant box and do Rails server. Yeah. Anything else?
You guys are quiet.
Yeah, come on.
Just saying.
You can just ask me for random advice. That's cool.
Why is it better than Docker?
I don't know. I just like using it, and it's something that I learned at my last job, and it's I just kind of stuck with it. I like it mainly because I like its portability into pretty much everything. So I don't know how much Docker can do that, but
You're not going to get like Docker just have it.
yeah.
Yeah, there's more to it.
Yeah, I actually, so my job right now is I'm the head of a QA department. So all the people under me have no idea any programming, anything whatsoever. But we have to QA everybody's local environments for some stupid reason that my project manager is a dumbass. But,
Don't tell him you gave this peanut, by the way.
oh, he wouldn't know what this is. He's
By the way, you're on YouTube.
he's also based in Austin, so I don't care.
Now, you are not the first one to slightly hatch on your company while on YouTube. I think that's happened at least 3 other times.
Everyone else in my company is awesome. But, so I was able to walk someone through who has no programming experience whatsoever, walk them through downloading the Git repository and just, okay, type exactly this in, now go to this on the browser, and then you can QA whatever you want. So it's a lot easier to just hit the ground running, especially if you come into a project that already has this and already has people working on it.
Can I add something also? Vagrant now has native support for Docker containers.
Oh,
You can have both.
yay.
Kind of go off that as well. If you're on OS X, OS X doesn't have the Linux kernel required to use Docker. So if you're on OS X and you want to play with Docker, you pretty much have to use VirtualBox. So a lot of people would use Vagrant to start VirtualBox to then build Docker stuff on that. So then it becomes this weird conception.
Yeah, this weird circular.
And you can put Docker containers inside Docker containers.
We should stop now.
Deeper and deeper into
Yeah.
that people don't really know.
Yeah, exactly. This was supposed to be a top skimming the surface.
Vagrant up and you're done.
Yeah, yeah. Hey guys, this was really easy, right? I have no idea what everybody was just talking about.
Oh, by the way, this is when you jot things down and you'll look it up later.
Yeah.
Hand in hand. Too bad your Ruby teacher was here tonight. You never know what might come up later in class.
I just, real quick, I want to plug my former company, the one where I learned all this stuff at. I just want to plug them real quick because they're hiring. If you're a UCF student and you need a job, they're really good. I didn't know when I got hired at this, or it's for UCF, so when I got hired for this department, I didn't know what server-side was. I didn't know what HTML was, or I knew what HTML was. I didn't know what server-side was. I didn't know what PHP, Ruby, Python, I didn't know there were different languages. So they took a chance on me. They really did everything they could to teach me everything that I know now. So I just want to give a shout out to Ian, Zach, and Shay. I'm not going to make you guys stand because you guys are very introverted and scared. They're the leaders and they're hiring. So if you guys want a student job that will teach you everything you need to know, definitely look them up. Or if you know of anyone who's poor and needs money.
Hashtag all students.
Yes. If you know a student. All right, and yeah, that's it for me. You can access the slideshow at this link down here. And
we can post it on my meetup as well.
That works too. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.